I never thought I'd post a photo of my own mother holding my daughter's severed braids. But there I was, thumb hovering over a share, heart pounding as I looked at my 7-year-old's tear-streaked face and butchered curls. "It's just hair," my mother had said, smiling with scissors still warm in her hand. It wasn't proper for her race. Those words ignited something primal inside me, the fierce protection of a mother colliding with the painful awakening of a daughter who'd spent decades excusing subtle racism. They say you inherit more than just DNA from family. You inherit silence. Complacency. The comfortable blindness of privilege. Well, today that inheritance ended. With one photo, I would force the world to see what I'd been too afraid to name. That sometimes the most dangerous form of prejudice wears pearls, sends birthday cards, and calls itself love. They say you can tell a lot about people by their smiles. The ones who smile the loudest often have the most to hide. That's what my husband Isaiah told me on our third date. I remember laughing it off, thinking he was being cynical. Now, 7 years into our marriage, I understand exactly what he meant. My name is Sabine Miller. I'm 34, white, raised in Oakwood Heights, one of those picture-perfect suburbs where the houses are too big and the minds too small. I married Isaiah Johnson when I was 26, against my mother's carefully worded concerns. Isaiah is black, brilliant, and the kindest man I've ever known. Together we have Nyla, our beautiful 7-year-old daughter who inherited her father's curls, his deep brown eyes, and unfortunately, my mother's scrutiny. My mother, Evelyn Miller, comes from old money and older prejudices. She's the type who donates to charity galas but clutches her purse tighter when a black teenager walks by. She's never said anything explicitly racist. She's too refined for that. Instead, she deals in whispers, suggestions, and backhanded compliments. When Isaiah and I announced our engagement, she smiled so wide I thought her face might crack. "Oh, how progressive," she said, champagne glass trembling slightly in her manicured hand. "I just hope you know what you're getting into, sweetheart." When Nyla was born, my mother cooed over her but always found ways to point out how different she looked from the rest of the family. "She's got such unique features," she'd say, examining my daughter like she was an exotic specimen. "I wonder which side she'll take after more as she grows." As Nyla got older, my mother's comments became more focused on her hair. "Have you thought about straightening it?" she'd ask casually. "It just seems so unmanageable." Or, "Doesn't all that hair get in her way?" Or, my personal favorite, "I hope she doesn't grow up confused about who she is." Each time, I'd feel that knot in my stomach tighten, but I'd swallow my words. "Mom, her hair is beautiful," I'd say, or, "Nyla knows exactly who she is." But I never confronted her directly. I never called her out on what she was really saying. I told myself I was keeping the peace. But the truth? I was afraid. Afraid of losing the only family I had left after my father died. Afraid of confirming what I already knew, that my own mother couldn't fully love her granddaughter because of the color of her skin. Isaiah noticed. Of course he did. "Your mother has a problem with our daughter," he said one night after Evelyn had left from one of her surprise visits. "She's just old-fashioned," I defended weakly. "Sabine," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "racism doesn't have a generation gap. It has enablers." The words stung, because they were true. I was enabling my mother's subtle racism by excusing it, by exposing our daughter to it without protection. But I kept telling myself things would get better, that my mother would eventually see Nyla for the incredible child she is. Last Monday, Nyla came home from school bubbling with excitement. "Mommy, Daddy, we're having Heritage Day next week." She waved a colorful flyer in the air. "We get to wear clothes that show our culture and bring food and everything." Isaiah knelt down to her level. "That sounds amazing, sunshine. What do you want to wear?" Nyla's eyes lit up. "Can I wear something from Africa? Like you showed me in those books." My heart swelled seeing the pride on Isaiah's face. He had been teaching Nyla about her African heritage, showing her pictures of traditional clothing, telling her stories passed down through his family. "Absolutely," he said. "We'll find something perfect." That weekend, We took Nyla to a cultural center in the city, where she picked out a beautiful dashiki in vibrant purples and golds. But what she was most excited about was getting her hair done. "Mommy, can I get braids like the lady in the picture?" she asked, pointing to a woman with intricate box braids. We found a salon owned by a woman named Leah, who spent hours braiding Nyla's hair into neat rows with purple beads that clicked softly when she moved her head. Nyla couldn't stop looking at herself in the mirror, turning this way and that to see how the beads caught the light. "I look like a princess," she whispered, awestruck. "You look like you," Isaiah said, his voice thick with emotion. That evening, my mother stopped by unannounced, one of her favorite power moves. When she saw Nyla, her smile froze. "Well, don't you look different?" she said, her eyes lingering on Nyla's braids. "I got braids for Heritage Day, Grandma." Nyla twirled, making the beads dance. "Do you like them?" "It's certainly elaborate," my mother replied. "Won't it be heavy for your little head? And those beads must make so much noise. Wouldn't you prefer something more subtle?" I saw Nyla's smile falter, and something inside me wanted to snap. But before I could speak, Isaiah stepped in. "The braids are traditional and protective," he explained calmly. "They're perfect for Heritage Day." My mother's lips thinned, but she nodded. "Of course, if that's what you all think is best." Later that week, Isaiah's company announced a weekend retreat for executives and their spouses. As director of marketing, his attendance was mandatory. I'd been looking forward to it. We rarely got time alone together with our busy schedules. "It's perfect timing," my mother said when I mentioned it. "I can watch Nyla. It'll be just like old times. You two need a break." Isaiah hesitated. "We could bring her with us. There's a kids program at the resort." "Nonsense," my mother insisted. "She'll be bored with all those corporate activities. Besides, I've been wanting some quality time with my granddaughter." I looked at Isaiah, saw the reservation in his eyes. Something in my gut whispered caution, but I pushed it away. My mother had never done anything overtly harmful, just made those little comments. Surely a weekend wouldn't hurt. "It'll be fine," I assured Isaiah later. "My mom can be difficult, but she loves Nyla in her own way." "That's what worries me," he said quietly. "Her own way isn't always the right way." But in the end, we agreed. My mother picked Nyla up Friday afternoon, beaming as she loaded Nyla's overnight bag into her silver Mercedes. "We're going to have such a wonderful time," she told Nyla. "I've got so many things planned." As they drove away, Nyla waved from the back seat, her braids catching the sunlight. I ignored the uneasy feeling in my stomach. Saturday evening, Isaiah and I were enjoying dinner at the resort's restaurant when my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. It was a photo of Nyla, but something was off. She was smiling stiffly at the camera, wearing a pale pink dress I didn't recognize, and her braids were hidden under a white silk scarf. "Doesn't she look like a proper young lady?" the text read. "Much more manageable this way, don't you think?" My fork clattered against my plate. Isaiah looked up, concerned. "What is it?" I showed him the photo, watched his jaw tighten. "What is your mother doing?" "I'm sure it's just for some silly dress-up game," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "Let me call her." My mother didn't answer. I texted back, "Why is Nyla wearing a scarf?" The reply came quickly. "Just trying something new. Don't worry, we're having a wonderful time. Enjoy your evening." I tried calling again. No answer. "We should go back," Isaiah said, already signaling for the check. "Let's not overreact," I replied, though anxiety was building in my chest. "It's just a scarf. We'll be home tomorrow morning, anyway." Isaiah looked at me, his eyes serious. "Sabine, you know this isn't about a scarf." Deep down, I did know. But I wasn't ready to admit what my mother might be capable of. That night, I barely slept. By 6 the next morning, I was already packed and ready to go, hours ahead of our planned departure. Isaiah didn't question it. He just loaded our bags into the car and drove us home in silence, the tension thick between us. As we pulled onto my mother's street with its manicured lawns and identical white colonial houses, I noticed Mrs. Patterson, her nosy neighbor, peering over the fence. "That's Sabine's car." I heard her call to someone. I told you they'd come back early. My heart raced as we pulled into my mother's driveway. And there, sitting alone on the front porch steps, was Nyla. Even from a distance, I could tell something was wrong. Her shoulders were slumped, her head bowed. I was out of the car before Isaiah had fully stopped, rushing toward my daughter. "Nyla, honey, are you okay?" She looked up slowly, and my world shattered. Her braids were gone. My daughter's beautiful, intricate braids that had taken hours to create, that had made her face light up with pride, gone. In their place was a choppy, uneven cut that barely reached her ears, the texture ruined by what looked like a crude attempt to straighten it. "Mommy," Nyla whispered, her voice small and broken. Tears welled at her eyes, but she seemed too shocked to let them fall. Before I could speak, the front door opened and my mother stepped out onto the porch, smiling like she was welcoming us to a Sunday brunch. "You're early," she said brightly. "We were just about to have pancakes." In her hand was a sealed plastic bag. Inside, I could see Nyla's braids, the purple beads still attached. My body went cold. The world narrowed to that plastic bag, to my daughter's devastated face, to my mother's smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What did you do?" My voice came out as a whisper, then rose. "What did you do?" "Now, Sabine, don't make a scene." My mother's tone was the same one she used when I'd spill something as a child. "It's just hair. It grows back." Nyla's small hand found mine, squeezing tight. "She said I didn't look like I belonged," she said, so quietly I almost missed it. "She said my hair was too wild." My mother rolled her eyes. "I said no such thing. I simply explained that sometimes we need to adapt to fit in better." The braids were drawing too much attention. Too much attention from who? I demanded, my shock giving way to fury. "From your bridge club? Your country club friends?" "From everyone, Sabine." My mother's composure slipped for a moment. "People already look at her differently. I'm trying to protect her." Behind me, I heard car door slam. Isaiah had finally parked and was approaching, his footsteps heavy on the concrete. When he reached us and saw Nyla, he froze. His face, usually so expressive, went completely blank, the kind of blank that comes when emotion is too overwhelming to show. "Nyla," he said softly, kneeling beside her. "Baby girl, what happened?" Before she could answer, my mother stepped forward, still clutching the bag of braids like it was a trophy. "I did her a favor," she said, her chin lifted defiantly. "This isn't Africa. This is America. She needs to know that." Isaiah's hands trembled as he touched Nyla's cropped hair gently. "Who did this?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Did you take her to a salon?" My mother laughed, actually laughed. "Of course not. Those braids were far too tight. They would have damaged her scalp. I simply removed them and evened things out." "You cut her hair?" Isaiah's voice rose slightly. "I styled it," my mother corrected, "into something more appropriate for a young lady." "Really, I don't see why you're both overreacting. It's just hair." Something in me snapped. Without thinking, I pulled out my phone and took a photo, capturing my mother's smug expression, the bag of Nyla's braids in her hand, and in the background, my daughter's tear-streaked face and butchered hair. "Sabine, what are you doing?" My mother's smile vanished. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened Instagram and posted the photo with a caption. "My own mother cut my daughter's hair off because she said it wasn't proper for her race." "Get in the car, Nyla," Isaiah said, his voice carefully controlled. "We're going home." "You can't just leave," my mother protested. "We need to discuss this like adults." "There's nothing to discuss," I said, grabbing Nyla's overnight bag from the porch. "You violated our daughter. You had no right." "Violated?" My mother scoffed. "It's a haircut, not an assault." Isaiah, who had been silent until now, turned to face my mother fully. "Mrs. Miller," he said, his voice ice-cold, "what you did was an assault. You took something that belonged to my daughter without her permission. You took something that was part of her identity, her heritage, her pride. You took it because you couldn't stand seeing the black part of her celebrated." My mother's face flushed. "That is ridiculous. I love Nyla." You love the parts of her that look like Sabine, Isaiah replied. The rest you want to cut away. He turned, lifting Nyla into his arms, even though she was getting too big for that. She buried her face in his neck, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. As we walked to the car, Mrs. Patterson and several other neighbors watched openly from their yards. I heard whispers, saw phones raised. This would be all over the neighborhood by dinner. Good, I thought savagely. Let them see. The drive home was silent except for Nyla's occasional sniffles. When we arrived, Isaiah carried her straight to the bathroom, where he gently washed her hair, trying to restore some of its natural texture after whatever my mother had put in it to straighten it. I sat on the edge of the tub, holding Nyla's hand. I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. Why doesn't Grandma like my hair? She asked, her voice small. Is there something wrong with it? No, Isaiah and I said simultaneously. Your hair is beautiful, I continued. It's perfect exactly as it is. Grandma was wrong. So wrong. But why did she do it? Nyla persisted. Isaiah and I exchanged looks over her head. How do you explain generations of racism to a 7-year-old? How do you tell your child that her grandmother sees her as less than because of her heritage? Sometimes, Isaiah said carefully, people are afraid of things that are different from what they know. And instead of learning to appreciate those differences, they try to make everything look the same. That's stupid, Nyla said bluntly. Despite everything, I laughed. Yes, baby. It is. That night, after we'd tucked Nyla into bed with extra stories and promises that her hair would grow back even more beautiful than before, Isaiah and I sat in the kitchen, the weight of the day settling between us. I should have listened to you, I said, staring into my untouched tea. You never wanted to leave her with my mother. Isaiah sighed. It's not about blame, Sabine. It's about what we do now. I pulled out my phone and opened Instagram. My post had exploded. Thousands of likes, hundreds of comments, shares across multiple platforms. The comments ranged from outrage to heartbreak to solidarity. This is disgusting. That poor baby. As a Black woman who grew up in a white family, this hits home. Sending love to your daughter. Your mother needs to be held accountable. This is assault. I'm crying for your little girl. Please tell her she's beautiful. There were also defenders of my mother. It's just hair, it grows back. Overreaction much. Maybe Grandma was trying to help. Not everything is about race. Why are your family drama online? Handle this privately. But they were vastly outnumbered by supporters. The story was resonating, touching a nerve with people who understood exactly what this act meant, the violence of erasing a child's cultural identity, the entitlement of white hands claiming ownership over a Black body, even if that body was partially descended from them. It's going viral, I told Isaiah, showing him the numbers climbing by the minute. He looked at the screen, then at me. Are you prepared for what that means? This isn't just about your mother anymore. This is about to become a conversation much bigger than us. I thought about Nyla, how small she'd looked sitting on that porch with her butchered hair. How her shoulders had slumped in shame over something that should have been her crown. Good, I said firmly. It's a conversation that needs to happen. I turned off my phone and finally took a sip of my tea, now cold. What do we tell Nyla about my mother? Isaiah's eyes were sad but resolute. The truth, Sabine. We can't protect her from racism by pretending it doesn't exist, especially when it comes from family. I nodded, tears filling my eyes. I never thought my own mother. Didn't you? Isaiah asked gently. Or did you just hope she'd keep it subtle enough that we could all pretend? The question hung in the air, unanswered, because we both knew the truth. I had spent years excusing my mother's little comments, her microaggressions, her subtle undermining of our family. I had convinced myself she was trying, that she loved Nyla in her own way. I had been complicit in my silence. Not anymore. By morning, my post had over 200,000 likes and 30,000 comments. My phone was flooded with messages, friends, acquaintances, strangers. The story had been picked up by several online publications. #LetNyla be Nyla was trending on Twitter. Our private family trauma had become a public conversation about race, identity, and the violence of forced assimilation. And somewhere in the midst of it all was my 7-year-old daughter, just wanting her hair back. The viral storm hit us like a tsunami. By Monday morning, 3 days after my mother had cut Nyla's hair, our story wasn't just trending, it was everywhere. Talk shows discussed it during their Hot Topics segments. News outlets reached out for interviews. Instagram influencers shared their own stories of cultural identity being erased by family members. Hashtags multiplied. Hashtag let Nyla be Nyla. Hashtag it is not just hair. Hashtag white silence harms. Hashtag protect black childhood. Each one carried thousands of stories similar to ours. Biracial children with white relatives who tried to erase their blackness. Black children adopted by white families who didn't understand how to care for their hair or respect its cultural significance. My DMs filled with messages from strangers. Thank you for speaking up. My white mother-in-law did the same to my son when he was 5. I never confronted her, and I've regretted it for 20 years. I'm a lawyer specializing in parental rights. If you need help keeping your mother away from your daughter, contact me. I'm a celebrity hairstylist with a focus on natural hair. I'd love to do Nyla's hair for free whenever she's ready for styling again. Isaiah's family called as soon as they saw the post. His mother, Janet, was furious. That white woman had no right to touch my grandbaby's hair. She fumed over the phone. None. I knew something was off about her from the first time we met. Always looking at Isaiah like he was some kind of project she approved of. Isaiah's sister Tiana was more pointed. Sabine, I love you, but how did you not see this coming? Your mother has been making slick comments about Nyla's hair since she was born. The accusation stung because it was fair. I had seen the signs. I had chosen to ignore them, to excuse them, to hope they would go away on their own. My privilege had allowed me to believe racism was something we could sidestep if we just tried hard enough, not something my daughter would have to face from her own grandmother. On Tuesday morning, I was washing dishes when Isaiah called me into the living room. My mother was on the local news. I was only doing what was best for the child, she told the reporter, her voice steady, her appearance immaculate as always. Those braids were inappropriate for a girl her age. They made her stand out in ways that would only hurt her in the long run. The reporter, a young black woman, kept her face professionally neutral. So you took it upon yourself to cut your granddaughter's hair without her parents' permission? I'm her grandmother, my mother replied, as if that explained everything. Sabine has always been easily influenced. She and her husband are raising Nyla to be a target. They're teaching her to be different when she should be learning to fit in. Fit in with whom, Mrs. Miller? The reporter asked. My mother smiled tightly. With society, of course. Which society would that be? The reporter pressed. The camera caught my mother's momentary confusion before she recovered. American society. This isn't about race, no matter what my daughter is claiming online. This is about a grandmother trying to help her granddaughter navigate a complicated world. I turned off the TV, my hands shaking. She really believes she did nothing wrong. Of course she does, Isaiah said quietly. That's how this kind of racism works. It disguises itself as concern, as protection. It never has to acknowledge what it really is. Nyla had been subdued since the incident. She didn't want to go to school, afraid of what her classmates might say about her hair. What if someone else wants me to look different too? She asked as I tried to coax her into her uniform. My heart broke all over again. No one at school is going to touch your hair, baby. I promise. And if anyone says anything unkind, you tell your teacher right away. But what if they think it silently? She asked, her eyes wide. Grandma thought my braids were bad for a long time before she cut them off. I could tell. Out of the mouths of babes. My 7-year-old had recognized what I had spent years pretending not to see. You're right, I admitted. Grandma did think that. And she was wrong. Completely, totally wrong. There was nothing bad about your braids, or your hair, or any part of you. We ended up keeping Nyla home that week. The attention was too much, the story too raw. Instead, Isaiah took a few days off work, and we focused on helping Nyla process what had happened. On Wednesday, we took her to a black-owned salon called Crown Glory. The owner, Janelle, had reached out after seeing our story online. "Bring that baby in," she'd written. "We'll take care of her." The salon was warm and welcoming, filled with women of all ages with beautiful natural hairstyles. Janelle led Nyla to a special chair decorated with ribbons and placed a plastic tiara on her head. "Every queen needs a crown," she explained. "And while yours is growing back, you can borrow this one." Janelle examined Nyla's hair gently, clucking her tongue at the uneven cut. "Your grandmother did a number on you, didn't she? But don't you worry. We're going to make it pretty again." "Can you make it look like before?" Nyla asked hopefully. Janelle shook her head. "Not yet, honey. We need more length for braids. But we can shape it up nice and neat, get those stressed ends healthy again. And when it grows out a bit more, we can try some cute protective styles." As Janelle worked, other stylists came by to offer Nyla words of encouragement. "My mama cut my dreadlocks off when I was 10, one shared. Said they weren't professional. Now look at me. I rock them down to my waist, and I'm a business owner." "When I was your age, I hated my curls," another told her. "Wanted straight hair like the white girls in my class. Now I teach people how to love their natural texture." By the time Janelle finished, Nyla's hair was shaped into a neat, even cut that framed her face beautifully. It wasn't her braids, but it was dignified, intentional. "What do you think?" Janelle asked, turning the chair to face the mirror. Nyla studied her reflection, touching her hair gently. "It's pretty," she said, a small smile forming. "And it feels like me again." That afternoon, I received an email from Dr. Camille Warren, a Black child psychologist specializing in racial identity development. She offered to work with Nyla pro bono. "What your daughter experienced was a racial trauma," she wrote. "Even with loving parents like you and your husband, she may need professional support to process this violation from someone she trusted." Isaiah and I agreed immediately. We'd both been worried about the long-term impact on Nyla. Would she internalize her grandmother's judgment? Would she begin to see her Black features as something to hide or change? Our first session with Dr. Warren was eye-opening. She spoke to Nyla with a direct kindness, never talking down to her. "How did you feel when your grandmother cut your hair?" she asked. Nyla thought for a moment, scared and sad, and like I did something wrong, even though I didn't think I did. "You absolutely did nothing wrong," Dr. Warren assured her. "What your grandmother did was wrong. She took something that belonged to you without asking." "My braids," Nyla said quietly. "Not just your braids," Dr. Warren corrected gently. "Your choice. Your right to look the way you want to look. Your connection to your heritage." She looked at Isaiah and me. This is where many well-meaning white parents of biracial children stumble. They don't understand that hair isn't just hair in the Black community. It's history, it's politics, it's identity. Cutting a Black child's hair without permission, especially to make it look less Black, is an act of violence. The word violence hit me like a physical blow. But Dr. Warren was right. What my mother had done wasn't just a boundary violation or a misunderstanding. It was an attempt to erase part of who Nyla was. That evening, after Nyla went to bed, I sat down to write a follow-up post. The original had been raw emotion, a mother's outrage captured in the moment. This one needed to be more reflective. Many have asked why I shared such a private family moment so publicly. I wrote, "The truth is I was angry. I am still angry. But beyond that, I recognized in that moment that my silence had enabled my mother's racism for too long. By never confronting her little comments, by excusing her microaggressions as generational, by prioritizing family peace over my daughter's dignity, I had been complicit. White silence protects white supremacy. Especially when that supremacy comes from people we love. My daughter deserved better than my silence. She deserved a mother who would stand up and say, unequivocally, this is wrong. This will not be tolerated. Not even from family. Not even from the people who raised me. I know some will see this as performative. As a white woman using my daughter's trauma for internet points or ally cookies. I can't control those perceptions. All I can do is commit to the ongoing work of examining my own privilege, protecting my daughter's right to her full identity, and calling out racism wherever I see it, starting in my own family. I hit post, then closed my laptop. Outside our window, a news van was parked across the street, the third one this week. Our phones rang constantly. Our private pain had become a public conversation. Meanwhile, my mother had doubled down. She gave another interview, this time to a conservative talk show host who sympathized with her traditional values and decried the woke mob attacking a grandmother for just trying to help. "They're painting me as some kind of monster," she complained, when all I did was give my granddaughter a haircut. In my day, children didn't have a say in their hairstyles. Parents and grandparents knew what was best. The host nodded sympathetically. It seems like a major overreaction to what was essentially just a bad hair day. Isaiah threw a pillow at the TV. A bad hair day? Is that what they think this is? I shook my head, too angry for words. This wasn't just about hair. It never had been. It was about a white woman deciding her biracial granddaughter looked too black. It was about generations of white standards of beauty being violently imposed on black bodies. It was about my mother believing she had the right to literally cut away the parts of Nyla that didn't fit her image of what a miller should look like. Most of all, it was about a little girl who went to her grandmother's house proud of her heritage and came home ashamed, violated, and confused. As painful as the public spotlight was, it was forcing conversations that needed to happen. Across social media, white parents of biracial children shared resources, admitted blind spots, committed to doing better. Black parents shared stories of schools and relatives who had touched or commented on their children's hair without permission. Multiracial adults recounted childhood experiences of having their identities policed by family members. Nyla's story had touched a nerve because it wasn't just her story. It was the story of boundaries crossed, of cultural erasure disguised as love, of the painful intersection where family and racism collide. And somewhere in the midst of this storm, my 7-year-old daughter was trying to make sense of it all, trying to understand why the woman who had given her Christmas presents and birthday cakes had also taken something precious from her, something she couldn't give back. "When will my hair grow back?" she asked every night before bed. "A little bit every day," Isaiah would tell her, kissing her forehead. "And it'll be even more beautiful than before. And stronger," I would add, because now it knows how to survive a storm. 2 weeks after the haircut incident, I sat in my car outside my mother's house, gathering courage. The media frenzy had started to die down, though our story still circulated online. Nyla was back in school, her confidence slowly rebuilding thanks to her classmates' supportive reactions and Dr. Warren's twice-weekly sessions. It was time to face my mother. I hadn't spoken to her since that Sunday morning, though she'd called repeatedly, left voicemails alternating between defensive and wounded. "I don't understand why you're doing this to me," she'd said in the last one. "Making me out to be some kind of monster to the whole world. This isn't how I raised you, Sabine." That was exactly the problem. How she'd raised me. The subtle lessons about what beauty looked like, who deserved respect, whose comfort mattered most. I'd spent 34 years absorbing those lessons, and now I was having to unlearn them all at once. Isaiah had asked me that morning, "Are you sure you want to do this alone?" "I need to," I'd replied. "This is between me and her first. Before it's about Nyla, before it's about you, it's about what I've allowed to happen all these years." Now, sitting in her driveway, I took a deep breath and texted her, "I'm outside. We need to talk." The front door opened almost immediately. My mother stood there, perfectly put together as always in a pale blue sweater set and pearl earrings. Her expression was carefully neutral, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. "I was wondering when you'd finally come," she said as I approached. "Coffee." Such normalcy, as if we were meeting for our usual monthly lunch, instead of having our first conversation after she'd assaulted my child. "No," I said, following her into the immaculate living room. "I'm not staying long." She sat primly on the edge of her favorite armchair. "I assume you're here to explain why you've dragged our family business across the internet? Do you have any idea what this has done to my reputation? My friends at the club, can barely look me in the eye. The charity board is considering asking me to step down. I'm here to give you a chance, I said, remaining standing. One chance to apologize, not to me, to Nyla. To recognize what you did and why it was wrong. My mother's face hardened. I have nothing to apologize for. I was trying to help that child fit in better. You and Isaiah are so determined to make her stand out, to emphasize the differences. It's not fair to her. Not fair to her? Or not comfortable for you? Don't twist my words, Sabine. Your father would be heartbroken to see how you're behaving. There it was, the trump card she'd always played when I started pushing boundaries. Dad had been gone 10 years now, but she still wielded his memory like a weapon. Dad would be horrified by what you did, I countered, surprising myself with my certainty. He loved Nyla exactly as she is. Your father understood the importance of tradition, of family legacy. He would have agreed that the child needs guidance. Her name is Nyla, not the child. And no, he wouldn't have. Dad was many things, but he wasn't cruel. My mother flinched. Cruel? Is that what you think of me now? After everything I've sacrificed for you? I sighed, suddenly exhausted. This isn't about you, Mom. It's about Nyla. It's about her right to wear her hair the way she wants, to embrace all parts of her heritage without shame. Heritage, my mother scoffed. She's American, Sabine. Not African. All these braids and dashikis, it's confusing her about who she really is. She knows exactly who she is. She's the one who gets to decide that, not you, not me, not anyone else. My mother's eyes narrowed. You've changed since you married him. I've grown, I corrected her. And yes, Isaiah has helped me see things I was blind to before. Things you taught me not to see. I glanced around the living room, at the dozens of family photos displayed on the walls and shelves. My parents' wedding. Me as a baby, a toddler, a teenager. My graduation. Family vacations. Not a single photo of Nyla. Where are the pictures of your granddaughter? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I have one in the kitchen, my mother said defensively.
One.
In 7 years. I haven't had time to print the recent ones. I shook my head, a strange calm settling over me. You've never seen her, have you? Not really. Not as family. Just as some intrusion. Some mistake I made that you've been tolerating. That's ridiculous. I love that child. Her name is Nyla, I repeated. And no, you don't. You love the idea of having a granddaughter. But the actual person she is? With her brown skin and her curly hair and her connection to her black heritage? That person terrifies you. My mother stood up abruptly. I think you should leave. I will. But first I need you to understand something. Isaiah told me something last night. He said, you have to pick. Not sides, but what values you'll raise our daughter with.
And he's right.
I can't raise Nyla to love herself while exposing her to someone who wants to cut away the parts of her that don't fit some narrow definition of acceptable. So that's it? You're choosing him over your own family?
No, Mom.
I'm choosing my daughter over your prejudice. I'm choosing love over fear. I'm choosing truth over comfort. I moved toward the door, then paused. If you ever want to be part of Nyla's life again, you need to do the work. Real work.
Therapy.
Education. Honest reflection about your beliefs and where they come from. Until then, you won't be seeing her. Or me. You can't keep my granddaughter from me, my mother said, her voice rising. I have rights. Try to enforce those rights, I said quietly, and I'll make sure the judge sees that photo of you holding her cut-off braids. We'll see how far your grandmother's rights get you. As I turned to leave, something caught my eye on a side table, a small wooden box I recognized from my childhood. It contained keepsakes my mother had saved from my early years. Acting on impulse, I opened it. Inside were the expected items, my first tooth, a lock of my baby hair, report cards. But at the bottom was something unexpected, a crumpled, yellowed drawing. I smoothed it out carefully. It showed 2 stick figures holding hands, one with yellow crayon hair, one with brown curly hair. Beneath them, in my wobbly childhood handwriting, This is my best friend Keisha. I remembered Keisha Williams, the only black girl in my kindergarten class. We'd been inseparable for most of that year, until suddenly we weren't. I never understood why our playdates had stopped. "You kept this?" I asked, confused. My mother's expression shuddered. "I was cleaning out your old room and found it. I meant to throw it away." But she hadn't. She'd kept it, hidden away in this box of precious memories, crumpled but preserved. Why did Keisha and I stop being friends? I asked, though I was beginning to understand. My mother didn't answer, but her silence told me everything. "You did the same thing to me, didn't you? Decided who was appropriate for me to associate with. Pushed me into ballet instead of the basketball team Keisha played on. Made sure I only invited certain girls to my birthday parties." The patterns were so clear now, the subtle ways she'd shaped my childhood to fit her vision of what a Miller daughter should be. "I was protecting you," she insisted. "Just like I was trying to protect Nyla." From what? From diversity? From relationships with people who don't look exactly like you? That's not protection, Mom. That's control. I tucked the drawing into my pocket and walked out, leaving the front door open behind me. As I reached my car, the weight of generational patterns settled on my shoulders. How easy it would have been to continue the cycle, to prioritize fitting in over standing up, to choose silence over confrontation. Never again. That evening, as I showed Isaiah the drawing, my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from my mother's attorney. "You've got to be kidding me," I said, reading the message aloud. "Formal notice of intent to file for grandparent visitation rights. She's actually suing us." Isaiah's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "We knew this might happen. Your mother isn't used to having her authority challenged." "What do we do?" "We fight," he said simply. "We protect our daughter." I nodded, a strange sense of clarity washing over me. The battle lines were drawn now. My mother had forced my hand. The next day, we contacted Andrea Barnes, a black attorney who specialized in family law cases with racial components. She'd reached out after seeing our story online, offering her services pro bono. "Unfortunately, this isn't the first case I've seen like this," Andrea told us during our initial consultation. "White grandparents using the legal system to maintain access to biracial grandchildren, often against the parents' wishes." "Does she have a case?" I asked. "Georgia does have grandparent visitation statutes, but they generally favor parents' rights to make decisions for their children. The fact that your mother physically altered Nyla's appearance without permission will work strongly in our favor." Andrea paused, looking at us both carefully. "But I want to prepare you. These cases can get ugly. Your mother may try to paint you as unstable, Isaiah as controlling, your parenting as harmful to Nyla. Are you ready for that kind of battle?" Isaiah and I exchanged glances. "We have to be," he said. "This isn't just about Nyla's hair anymore. It's about her right to grow up without having her identity policed by someone who claims to love her." As we left Andrea's office, Isaiah took my hand. "Are you okay? This is your mother we're talking about." I thought about the crumpled drawing in my pocket, about all the ways my mother had subtly shaped my worldview, about how close I'd come to continuing those patterns with my own daughter. "I'm sad," I admitted, "but I'm certain Nyla deserves better than what I got." That night, Nyla had a breakthrough during her session with Dr. Warren. After weeks of processing the incident through play therapy and art, she finally put her feelings into words. "I thought Grandma loved me," she said as she colored a picture of herself with new braids. "But she only loved parts of me." Out of the mouths of babes, indeed. The courtroom was quieter than I expected. Somehow I'd imagined more drama, raised voices, pounding gavels. Instead, there was just the soft rustle of papers, the squeak of chairs, and the steady voice of Judge Monica Thompson as she reviewed the case before her. My mother sat across the aisle with her attorney, a silver-haired man named James Whitfield, who specialized in traditional family values cases. She looked smaller somehow, less imposing in the stark fluorescent lighting of the courtroom. Our attorney, Andrea, had prepared us well. "Don't react to provocations," she'd warned. "Judge Thompson will be watching your behavior as much as listening to the testimony." So I sat still, hands folded in my lap, as James Whitfield painted a picture of my mother as a loving grandmother, devastated by being cut off from her only grandchild over a simple misunderstanding. Mrs. Miller has been a pillar of the community for decades, he told the judge. A devoted mother and grandmother who only wants what's best for her family. Yes, she made a mistake in cutting the child's hair without permission. She acknowledges that. But to use that single lapse in judgment as grounds to deny all contact with her granddaughter is vindictive and harmful to the child. When it was Andrea's turn, she stood tall, her voice steady. Your Honor, this case isn't about a lapse in judgment. It's about a fundamental disrespect for parental authority and, more importantly, for a child's cultural identity and bodily autonomy. Mrs. Miller didn't just give her granddaughter an unauthorized haircut. She deliberately removed a hairstyle that had deep cultural significance, that the child was proud of, that connected her to her Black heritage. Andrea played a voice memo we'd recorded with Nyla's permission, her small voice describing what happened that weekend. Grandma said my hair made me look wild. She said people would stare at me and think bad things. She said I didn't look like a Miller. When I cried, she told me to stop being dramatic. I asked her to call Mommy and Daddy first, but she said they would say no because they don't understand what's best for me. The recording continued, Nyla's voice breaking as she said, I don't feel safe with her anymore. I'm afraid she'll try to change other parts of me too. I saw the judge's expression soften slightly as she listened. My mother stared straight ahead, her back rigid. When it was my mother's turn to testify, she maintained her composure, sticking to her narrative about trying to help Nyla fit in better. I admit I should have asked permission first, she conceded. But I was doing what any grandmother would do, helping my granddaughter look her best. This wasn't about race. It was about tidiness, about appropriate styling for a young girl. Mrs. Miller, Judge Thompson interjected, do you often make decisions about your granddaughter's appearance without consulting her parents? My mother hesitated. I make suggestions. Sabine usually agrees with me. But in this case, you didn't suggest. You acted. Why? Because I knew they wouldn't agree, and I felt strongly that those braids were inappropriate. Inappropriate why? They were drawing too much attention. Children should blend in, not stand out. Blend in with whom, Mrs. Miller? The judge pressed. My mother faltered, seemingly realizing the trap. With their peers, Your Honor. And Nyla's peers at her school. They all wear their hair in ways that blend in? Well, I suppose not all of them, but... Mrs. Miller, would you have cut off your granddaughter's braids if she were fully white with straight blonde hair that had been braided for, say, a dance recital? The courtroom fell silent. My mother's mouth opened, then closed. That's different, she finally said. How so? It just is, my mother insisted, her composure cracking. Those braids were making her look, they weren't suitable. They weren't making her look white enough. Is that what you mean, Mrs. Miller? I object. James Whitfield stood up. Your Honor is putting words in my client's mouth. Sustained, Judge Thompson said, but her expression had already told me everything I needed to know about where her sympathies lay. When Isaiah took the stand, he spoke with a quiet dignity that filled the room. It wasn't just hair, he explained. It was her crown. And her crown was stolen by a woman who thinks she owns her. He looked directly at my mother as he spoke. My daughter deserves to grow up proud of every part of herself, her white heritage and her Black heritage. Mrs. Miller has made it clear that she only values one of those parts. That's not love. That's conditional acceptance, and no child should have to earn their grandmother's love by erasing parts of themselves. By the time I testified, I was fighting back tears. I described finding Nyla on the porch, her hair butchered, her spirit crushed. I explained the patterns I'd only recently recognized in my own upbringing, the subtle shaping of my worldview to exclude and devalue anyone who didn't fit my mother's narrow definition of acceptable. I don't want to keep my daughter from having a relationship with her grandmother, I said honestly. But that relationship can't come at the cost of her sense of self, her cultural heritage, or her emotional safety. After 3 days of testimony, Judge Thompson delivered her ruling. She denied my mother's petition for mandated visitation rights, citing concerns about Nyla's emotional welfare. While I recognize Mrs. Miller's desire to maintain a relationship with her granddaughter, the evidence suggests that unsupervised contact would pose a risk to the child's developing sense of identity and self-worth. No visitation will be granted at this time without therapeutic mediation and signed approval from the child's parents and therapist. My mother sat perfectly still as the judgment was read, her face a mask. When court was adjourned, she walked past us without a word, her attorney trailing behind her, already discussing an appeal. In the weeks that followed, the story faded from public view, though occasionally a new article would appear analyzing the case as an example of how white supremacy operates within families. My mother's circle largely abandoned her, not necessarily because they disagreed with her views, but because she'd made them explicit, uncomfortable to witness. A few staunch supporters remained, people who believed she'd been canceled for a simple haircut. They sent angry messages, sometimes showed up at our house to voice their support for grandparents' rights. We installed security cameras, changed our phone numbers. Through it all, we focused on Nyla. I deleted my social media accounts, not out of fear or regret, but to create space for our family to heal privately. We didn't need an audience anymore. We needed peace. Is Grandma still mad at me? Nyla asked one evening as I tucked her into bed. No, baby, I said, stroking her hair, which was growing out beautifully. Grandma isn't mad at you. She's learning. But we don't have to wait around for her to catch up. Isaiah's family stepped in to fill the void left by my mother's absence. His parents drove down from Baltimore monthly, bringing love, understanding, and knowledge about Nyla's Black heritage that I couldn't provide alone. Janet, Isaiah's mother, taught Nyla how to tie a headscarf, telling stories about how her own grandmother had passed down the technique. Nyla soaked it all in, eager for connections to a legacy my mother had tried to sever. 3 months after the court decision, we hosted a small gathering in our backyard, a crowning day to celebrate Nyla's hair, which had grown enough for short braids again. Leah from Crown Glory Salon came to do the honors, weaving in purple beads that matched Nyla's favorite dress. Friends brought dishes representing their own cultural backgrounds. Isaiah's college roommate Mark, a professional photographer, took pictures of Nyla dancing in the garden, her new braids catching the sunlight, her smile wider than we'd seen in months. As the party wound down, I found Isaiah watching Nyla from the porch steps. She's going to be okay, he said, making room for me beside him. Better than okay, I agreed. She's going to be magnificent. I leaned against him, thinking about the new kind of silence that had entered our lives. Not the silence of things unsaid, of prejudice unchallenged, but the quiet peace of boundaries maintained, of a family finding its way forward on its own terms. What's the first thing you remember about that day? The question came from my laptop screen, where a Zoom window showed a journalism class at Emory University. I'd been invited as a guest speaker for years after the incident that had changed our family forever. I considered the question carefully. The plastic bag, I finally said. My mother standing there with Nyla's braids sealed inside a plastic bag, like they were evidence of some crime she'd solved. That image, it still comes to me in dreams sometimes. The professor nodded, making a note. And how has your relationship with your mother evolved since then? It's complex, I admitted. After about a year of no contact, she agreed to attend therapy, both individual sessions and later, family sessions with me. She's not allowed unsupervised time with Nyla, and honestly, I don't know if she ever will be. But she's trying in her way. She's realized she has a choice: evolve or lose her family entirely. This was the diplomatic version, of course. The reality was messier. My mother had spent months playing the victim before her social isolation became unbearable. Her initial attempts at therapy had been performative at best, focused on getting access to Nyla rather than understanding the harm she'd caused. The breakthrough, ironically, had come when she started reading the memoir I'd written about our experience. Her hair, her crown, A Mother's Reckoning, had begun as personal therapy, just me journaling to process the trauma, the court case, the painful excavation of my own complicity in the racism that had shaped my childhood. But it had grown into something more, an unflinching exploration of how white supremacy operates in families, how it disguises itself as concern and protection, how it weaponizes love to enforce conformity. The manuscript had caught the attention of a publisher, and now, for years later, it was being taught in university courses on race, family dynamics, and cultural identity. My mother had read it in secret, then called me in tears. "I didn't know," she'd said. "I didn't want to know." It wasn't an apology, not really. But it was a crack in the armor, a first step toward the hard work of unlearning decades of conditioning. Now, at 11, Nyla was thriving. The trauma hadn't disappeared. She still had moments of insecurity about her appearance, still sometimes asked if people were judging her hair. But she had tools to process those feelings, a support system that affirmed her whole self, and a confidence that grew stronger each day. She created a picture book for a school project titled My Hair, My Choice, about a little girl whose grandmother tries to change her appearance. In the story, the girl stands up for herself, teaches her grandmother about her heritage, and ultimately helps the older woman see the beauty in difference. It wasn't our real story. It was the one Nyla wished had happened, the one where reconciliation came easily, where education led swiftly to understanding. But there was wisdom in it too, a child's insight into the healing power of truth spoken gently but firmly. The book had been laminated and displayed at her school's art fair, where a children's book editor had seen it and expressed interest in developing it for publication. Nyla had been ecstatic, immediately planning a series about biracial children navigating identity in predominantly white spaces. "That's what I want to be when I grow up," she'd announced. A storyteller who helps people understand each other better. Isaiah and I had exchanged proud glances. Our daughter, turning trauma into purpose. After the Zoom lecture ended, I closed my laptop and joined Isaiah and Nyla in the kitchen. They were preparing dinner together, Nyla standing on a step stool to reach the counter, her braids, now long enough to reach the middle of her back, secured in a colorful scarf. "How'd it go?" Isaiah asked, passing me a glass of wine.
Good.
Same questions as usual. They've been reading the book as part of their unit on family systems and race. Nyla looked up from the vegetables she was chopping. "Did you tell them about our foundation?" "I did," I smiled. They were very impressed. The Antkin Foundation had grown out of our experience, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting mixed-race children and their families, providing resources on cultural identity, hair care, and navigating relationships with extended family members who might not fully accept their heritage. What had started small, just a website and monthly support group at our local community center, had expanded to workshops in schools, resources for therapists, and an annual conference that drew families from across the country. Isaiah now served as the foundation's executive director, having left his corporate job 2 years ago to focus on the work full-time. I divided my time between writing, speaking engagements, and coordinating the foundation's educational programs. "Mom," Nyla said suddenly, "Grandma sent me a birthday card today." My heart skipped. "She did." Nyla nodded, continuing to chop carrots with careful precision. "It came the mail." There was a note inside that said she's sorry. This wasn't the first time my mother had sent a card. Every birthday, every Christmas, there was an envelope with Nyla's name in my mother's elegant handwriting, usually containing a check, sometimes a brief note about the weather or her garden or her bridge club. But an apology that was new. "What did you do with it?" I asked casually, trying not to make too much of this development. "I put it in my memory box," Nyla said. "With the others." The memory box had been Dr. Warren's idea, a place for Nyla to store reminders of experiences she wasn't ready to fully process, but didn't want to forget. She kept the first card my mother had sent after the court case, photos from before the incident, small tokens from her grandmother that carried complicated emotions. "Do you want to talk about it?" Isaiah asked gently. Nyla considered this, then shook her head. "Not yet. Maybe later." We respected her decision. One of the most important lessons we'd learned was that Nyla needed to set her own pace in dealing with the trauma and its aftermath. Our job wasn't to push reconciliation or closure, but to support her autonomy, the very thing my mother had violated. Later that week, I had my own therapy session. For years on, I still went regularly. The incident had forced me to confront not just my mother's racism, but my own, the unconscious biases I'd absorbed growing up, the ways I sometimes failed to recognize microaggressions directed at my husband and daughter, the white fragility that made me defensive when called out. I've been thinking about generational patterns, I told my therapist, Dr. Chen. How we inherit not just eye color and height, but worldviews, prejudices, blind spots. And how have you been working to break those patterns? She asked. By listening more than I speak. By believing people when they tell me about their experiences, even when those experiences make me uncomfortable. By examining my own reactions when I feel defensive about race. It was ongoing work, never finished. Sometimes exhausting, sometimes painful, but necessary. That evening, Nyla had been invited to participate in a school video about heritage. We watched from the audience as she sat in front of the camera, poised and articulate beyond her years. My hair tells a story, she said when asked what heritage meant to her. It's the story of my dad's family coming from West Africa generations ago. It's the story of my mom learning to see beauty in difference. It's my story, too, about standing up for myself, about knowing who I am. And no one gets to erase it. The phrase caught on. Within weeks, Black and biracial girls were posting videos on social media with a hashtag no one gets to erase it, sharing their own stories of having their appearances policed, their identities questioned, their heritage minimized. Nyla didn't have social media access yet. She was still too young. But Isaiah showed her some of the age-appropriate videos. She watched in wide-eyed wonder as girls and women shared experiences similar to hers, some finding strength in her words. I didn't know there were so many of us, she said quietly. There always have been, Isaiah told her. But now you're all finding your voices. That Sunday, as we sat on our back porch watching Nyla play with the neighbors' kids, I scrolled through some of those videos on my phone. Young voices claiming their right to exist exactly as they were, to wear their hair in styles that honored their heritage, to take up space in a world that often tried to shrink them. I looked up to see Nyla running across the yard, her braids flying behind her, her laughter carried on the breeze. Head high, stance confident, unapologetically whole. This was the real victory. Not the court case we'd won, not the foundation we'd built, not even the memoir that was helping others navigate similar situations. It was this moment, watching my daughter reclaim the joy that had been temporarily stolen from her, watching her move through the world with a certain knowledge that she belonged exactly as she was. Someday, she would tell her own version of this story. It would be different from mine, shaped by her experience as the one whose body had been violated, whose identity had been questioned. I hoped it would be a story of resilience rather than victimhood, of growth rather than bitterness. For now, though, I was content to watch her play, to see her shine, to witness the unfolding of a strong, confident girl who knew, beyond any doubt, that her crown, in all its glory, was hers alone to wear. Would you cut away parts of a child to make them fit in, or would you stand against the family you love to protect the person they truly are? Like and subscribe for more stories that force us to confront the uncomfortable truths hiding in plain sight.